Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
Disclaimer on reading materials. The stories are carefully crafted, altered, and embellished by our team. This is to abide by YouTube's policies on reading materials. We hold sole intellectual rights to these stories as original content. Alright, so this started during that weird in-between time after winter break when everything feels kind of fake. I was in this phase where I kept deleting Tinder and re-downloading it every other week just for something to do. My work hours were slow, our roommate had gone home for a month, and I was pretty much just eating cereal for dinner and falling asleep to crime documentaries I already read. So when I matched with Annie, it was honestly just to see if someone would actually message me back. She did. Her profile was simple, one pic at a bookstore, one at a farmer's market, and one with a cat that looked like it hated her. Her bio said she liked tea over coffee, long conversations, and mildly pretentious movies, which felt safe. She messaged first, asked what book I'd read last, and even though I lied, I said something classic when I actually just read a graphic novel. She acted impressed. I didn't think much of it, but she was good at keeping the convo going, not too flirty, just curious, like she wanted to figure me out or something. We agreed to meet at this vegan cafe that had decent reviews but was mostly known for its lavender lattes and weird artwork in the bathrooms. The kind of place that tries really hard to be not basic, but somehow ends up being extra basic because of it. Anyway, I got there early, sat near the window, and tried not to look like someone waiting to be stood up. She showed up maybe 5 minutes later, wearing this oversized green jacket and headphones around her neck. She looked different from her pics in a way that wasn't bad, just more real. Less curated. She had this calmness to her, like someone who actually meditated and didn't just say they did in their bio. She smiled like she'd known me for a while, and I remember thinking this might be a cool night. We ordered drinks, sat down, and for the first 20 minutes or so, it was just normal small talk. She asked about my job, where I live, the usual. I asked her what she did, and she said she was a grad student in psych. That kind of caught my attention because she hadn't mentioned it before. I asked what kind of psych, and she said she was working on her dissertation about modern dating behavior and emotional detachment in early stage relationships. I didn't think too much of it at the time, just nodded and said something dumb like, "Oh, cool." She didn't bring it up again for a while. We talked about music, weird jobs we had, and then somehow ended up debating if cereal was a meal or a snack. I liked that she didn't constantly check her phone or try to humble brag. She seemed really tuned in, like she was actually listening to what I was saying. That should have been my first clue. We were halfway through our food when the vibe shifted. She got a little more serious, leaned forward, and asked if she could tell me something kind of odd. I said sure, because what else do you say? She took a sip of her drink and just casually dropped it. She was only dating people right now as part of her dissertation research. Like, oh Jesus. I legit laughed at first because I thought she was joking. Like one of those dry humor bits where someone says something totally unhinged with a straight face. But she just looked at me and nodded. Said she was tracking emotional responses, behavioral patterns, and how people react to different types of vulnerability. And that she always told her subjects by the end of the first date. Said it was ethical transparency. I sat there kind of frozen for a sec. Not even mad, just confused. She explained that she never used names in her notes, didn't record anything without consent, and wasn't trying to trick anyone. She said I seemed emotionally aware, which is why she picked me. Like I was some kind of specimen in a science fair, except with a beard and anxiety. I asked her straight up if I was just a data point. She said no, or not only that. She said she genuinely enjoyed our conversation, but that part of her brain couldn't help but notice how I avoided eye contact when I talked about my family and how I tapped my fingers when the table got quiet. She was studying stuff like that, and apparently she'd gone on 13 dates in the past 2 months, all part of the study. I wasn't even angry, just weirded out. It felt like being in a job interview I didn't know I'd apply for. She offered to show me her notebook, which she didn't have on her, thank God, and said if I wanted it she could remove my entry. But the idea that there even was one messed with my head. Like, what had I said that night that was gonna end up quoted in some paper titled Romantic Disassociation in the Digital Age? We finished the date pretty normally after that. I didn't storm out or anything. I just couldn't really focus after she dropped that on me. I kept wondering if everything I said was being mentally filed away into categories, like emotional avoidance or mid-level attachment style. It made me want to stop talking completely just so I didn't give her more ammo. After we left the cafe, we stood outside awkwardly for a bit. She asked if I wanted to hang out again sometime, and I honestly didn't know how to answer. I told her I'd think about it, which I guess was polite code for no. She messaged me the next day thanking me for being open and authentic, and said our convo was one of her most interesting yet. I didn't reply. Not out of pettiness, I just didn't know what kind of role I was supposed to play in that situation. Like, was I supposed to keep dating her just to help her thesis? Or was she hoping something real would grow out of something fake? I talked to a friend about it later, and he thought it was kind of ass. Said she was just using what she had, and that at least she was being honest. But I don't know, man, it didn't feel honest. It felt like being on a hidden camera show, except the camera was someone's brain dissecting your every word. Since then, I've seen her pop up on the app a couple times. Different photos, but same green jacket. I swiped left every time. Not because I think she's evil or whatever, but because I'm not trying to get psychoanalyzed while eating a lentil burger again. I matched with this guy, Jamal, who honestly had the whole package on paper. Like he was in med school, had this clean sense of humor, and even messaged me first with something that wasn't hey or what you doing, which already put him in the top 1%. His photos looked normal too. Some of him in scrubs, one at a beach with his friends, and one where he's holding a dog that may or may not have been his. Still, vibes were decent. We chatted for a week or so before he asked if I wanted to meet up for sushi near the hospital where he was doing rotations. It was one of those trendy places that looked like it belonged in a Netflix food doc. Real moody lighting, the kind where you can't even see the soy sauce in front of you. He was already there when I showed up, wearing this navy button-up, looking exactly like his pics, which is rarer than it should be. I remember thinking this might actually go well. The convo flowed easy. He had that confidence people have when they're used to talking to strangers all day, which makes sense with him being in med school. He talked about how hard rotations were, but made it sound kind of romantic in a sleep-deprived, coffee-fueled way. I told him about my job, he asked thoughtful questions, laughed at all the right times. He even paid for dinner without making it weird, like I didn't even have time to do the fake wallet reach. After dinner, he suggested a walk through the little park behind the restaurant. It was summer, warm night, and the place had those old metal benches and trees that looked like they were meant to be sketched by some art student. He said he liked to come there when he needed to breathe between rotations. We sat for a while, talked about dumb stuff like favorite movies and whether cereal counts as soup. He walked me back to the station and said he had to get up early for a shift, but that he'd definitely message me. And he actually did that night. Said it was great meeting me, told me to get home safe. Super normal. So here's where it started to shift. A week later, one of my friend's little brothers, he's like 20, very online Reddit brain, sends me a screenshot. It's from a Discord server he's in with a bunch of his gaming friends. The post is a photo of me from the back, clearly taken at that sushi place with a caption like, "Sushi with 7 tenths." Vibes were mid, but she laughed at my rotation jokes. Boys, rate. I literally stared at it for a full minute trying to figure out if it was real. The username was something generic like Scrubga24, but the profile pic was unmistakably him. Same face from the dating profile, just in worse lighting. The comments under the post were a mix of emojis, numbers, one guy talking about my hair, and another saying solid tier 2 material, like it was some game's skin or something. My stomach legit dropped, and then it got worse. The friend's brother, shout out to him for being weirdly moral for a Discord mod, told me that this guy had posted similar reviews every week for like months, always with a blurred face or back view photo. Some of the posts had videos, like you could hear the girl talking, laughing, just full on being on a date without realizing she was being filmed. I was so creeped out. I scrolled back through our texts like maybe I missed some hint or warning sign. But no, nothing weird, nothing off. He was just really good at faking the whole decent guy thing. I didn't message him. I just reported him on the app and blocked his number. I tried to report the Discord server too. But you know how that goes, unless you're in it or have the invite link. It's like trying to report a ghost. I told a few friends about it, and one of them was like, "You should blast him on socials," but I didn't want that kind of attention. Plus, what was I gonna do? Post his med school info and hope his dean happens to see it between rounds. It just felt gross. But after that, I started thinking about all the little things I ignore on dates. The way people glance around before you take a bite. The weird way some guys prop their phones up on the table. Like, once you know this kind of stuff happens, your brain just starts connecting dots where maybe they're not even there. The whole thing just made me super hyper aware of how some people date like it's content creation. Like it's not even about connection. It's about having a story for their group chat or some dark little server where they can feel cool for being emotionally detached. Anyway, it's been a while now, but I still check every now and then to make sure no one's posting anything weird about me online. I even made my Instagram private again, which I hadn't done since college. One of my friends joked that maybe I should have left a review on him too. Would not recommend. Brings camera to dinner. Funny how someone can seem so put together, only to end up being a dude who basically turns his love life into a twisted version of Yelp. I met Joseph on one of those weekends where you wake up hungover and promise yourself you'll stop going out so much, but then end up scrolling Tinder in bed just to feel something. It wasn't even that I was looking for anything serious. Honestly, I was bored and kind of lonely and trying to distract myself from a situationship that had just fizzled out with zero closure. Joseph's profile was weirdly plain. One mirror selfie, one with a dog that definitely wasn't his, and one blurry group photo that looked like it was taken during a power outage. But he was kind of cute in a regular guy way, and his bio said something about liking cold pizza and public libraries, which felt low stakes and kind of funny. We matched late on a Sunday night, and he messaged first with some basic "what's up" opener. I almost ignored it but replied because I couldn't sleep anyway. Our convo was fine. Nothing special, but not painful either. He wasn't overly try-hard, just kind of chill and random. He asked me out by Tuesday, and I said yes because I had nothing going on that night and figured why not. We decided to meet at this dive bar a few blocks from where I live, the kind of place with sticky floors, good fries, and a jukebox that never works. He was already there when I showed up, sitting in a booth with 2 beers already on the table. That kind of threw me off, but he said he just figured I'd want one. I mean, he guessed right, so I let it slide. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos, which sounds like a low bar, but is way more rare than it should be. He had this big hoodie on and kept fidgeting with the drawstrings, which made him seem a little nervous in a not bad way. The first half of the night was actually fun. He was easy to talk to, told me this whole story about how he accidentally adopted a cat from Craigslist after a breakup, and I told him about how I once got banned from a trivia night for aggressive whispering during the final round. It felt like one of those dates where you don't check the time, which is rare. Around 10, he said he lived just a few blocks away and asked if I wanted to walk back with him and hang for a bit. I wasn't sure, but I also didn't want to go home yet. I figured I'd just stay for like half an hour, maybe one more drink, then bounce. So I said sure. When we got to his building, it was one of those small apartment complexes with way too many buzzers and no working lights in the hallway. It kind of smelled like someone had burned toast 3 years ago, had never left. He opened the door and was like, just ignore the mess, which made sense because his place looked like someone had tried to clean but gave up halfway through. There were dishes in the sink, a towel on the couch, and a laundry basket in the middle of the room that clearly hadn't moved in weeks. He offered me water and flopped down on the couch, motioning for me to sit. I sat in the armchair instead, partly because I didn't want to crush whatever was under the towel. He started talking about his job at the shipping warehouse and how the night shift gave him weird dreams. I nodded along, half listening, but also looking around the room trying to figure out if someone else lived there. There were way too many shoes by the door. Like, not just guy shoes. There were Converse and boots that looked way too small to be his. I thought maybe he had a sister or a roommate or something. I didn't say anything, though, until a few minutes later when someone opened the front door. It was a girl. Like a full-grown, clearly not a roommate woman, carrying a tote bag and wearing pajamas. She stopped in the doorway and looked at me like I was a piece of furniture that didn't belong. I froze. Joseph stood up, said her name, Jade, I think, and then mumbled something I didn't catch. She ignored him and looked straight at me, asked who I was, not in a crazy way, just calm. Way too calm. I started saying I was just leaving, but she cut me off and said, "So you're number 4 this week." That's when my brain started connecting things. The second pair of shoes, the pink mug on the counter, the messy towel that suddenly looked like a woman's hair wrap. I just stood up and grabbed my jacket without saying anything else. Joseph tried to say something. I think it was wait, but I walked past both of them and didn't look back. I got outside and walked 3 blocks before realizing I hadn't even called an Uber. I just kept walking, trying to process what the hell had just happened. I ended up at a diner, sat at the counter with a coffee I didn't want, and just stared at the menu for like 20 minutes. Then I ordered pancakes and texted a friend, not to tell her the whole thing, but just to say, Yua. Later that night, when I was back home, wrapped in a blanket on the couch and rewatching an old episode of some show I didn't even like anymore, I kept thinking about her face. Jade. The way she looked at me, not even surprised, just tired. Like I wasn't the first, and probably wouldn't be the last. I wasn't even mad at her, or at him. I felt weirdly embarrassed, like I'd walked into a scene I wasn't supposed to be in. Like I glitched into someone else's argument. He texted me 2 days later with a half-assed, "Hey, sorry about the other night. Things got messy." I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. I just let it sit there unread. Every now and then I still wonder if he ever figured out how weird that was, or if he just kept doing it, bringing girls back while his maybe ex, but not actually ex, was still living there, thinking she wouldn't say anything. The weird part is how normal he seemed. Like you expect red flags, but sometimes people are just really good at hiding them under laundry baskets and half-truths. This wasn't even supposed to be a real date. Like I wasn't actually trying to meet anyone. My friend dared me to swipe right on every profile for 24 hours just to see what kind of chaos would come out of it. I was bored and mildly tipsy when I agreed. That's how I matched with Nina. Her profile was full of the dramatic black and white selfies and one photo of her staring off into the distance like she was in a music video. She looked kind of intense, but also super hot, and I figured she'd either ghost me or send one weird message then vanish. She didn't. She messaged first. Said something like, "You have mysterious eyes," which caught me off guard because I don't. But whatever, it worked. I replied with a dumb joke, and she actually laughed at it, or typed lol, which is the Tinder version of a laugh, I guess. We talked for a couple hours, really fast-paced, kind of flirty but also a little cryptic on her end. I asked what she did, and she said retail therapy and revenge. I thought she was just being edgy. After like 2 days of chatting, she asked if I was free for dinner Friday night. I said yeah, and she sent the name of this fancy place downtown I'd never even heard of. I Googled it, and it was way fancier than anything I'd been to in a while. I texted her like, "You sure you want to go all out for a first date?" And she just replied, "Trust me, it'll be worth it." So Friday rolls around, and I actually put effort into what I was wearing, which is rare for me. I showed up early and waited outside because the place looked way too expensive for me to be the one walking in first and looking lost. Nina showed up exactly on time in this tight red dress that made every single guy on the street turn their head. She looked like she was walking into a movie scene, and I felt like the dude who wasn't even listed in the credits. She kissed me on the cheek, called me charming, and then walked straight inside like she owned the place. I followed, Loki trying to match her energy. We sat down and she ordered us drinks before I could even open my menu. She didn't ask what I wanted, just ordered some wine for both of us and said I'd like it. Weirdly, she was right. The vibe was strange, though. She kept glancing toward the front of the restaurant like she was waiting for someone. At first, I thought maybe she was just anxious or checking for a friend or something. But then I noticed she barely touched her wine, and every time the door opened, her whole body would shift toward it. Halfway through the appetizer, I finally asked if everything was okay. She gave me this wild smile and said, "Don't worry, just waiting for the fireworks." I laughed like it was a joke, but my brain was doing all kinds of mental gymnastics trying to figure out what the hell she meant. And then it happened. This guy walked in, short beard, button-up shirt, holding hands with a blonde girl who was laughing at something he just said. Nina spotted him immediately. Her whole posture changed. She sat up straight, looked directly at him, and then reached over and grabbed my hand. Tight, like way too tight for a casual first date. The guy saw her. His face dropped. He let go of the blonde girl's hand. Nina just stared at him and gave him a slow wave. No smile. No words, just that wave. He froze for a second, then pulled the girl aside and started whispering something to her. She looked confused. Nina leaned in close to me and whispered, "That's my boyfriend." I blinked, like actually blinked hard. She followed that up with, well, ex now, obviously. I sat there trying to piece it all together while this guy looked like he was about to throw up in the corner. Nina didn't even look at him again. She turned back to me and said, "Thanks for coming." I didn't want to do this with some random loser. I just nodded because what was I even supposed to say? Apparently, she had found out he was cheating 2 weeks ago. Screenshots, DMs, the whole thing. He kept denying it, telling her she was crazy, gaslighting her in every possible way. So instead of yelling or confronting him directly, she said this out. Match with someone new. Picked the restaurant she knew he always went to with his side piece. Timed it. Waited. And there I was, the decoy. We didn't even eat the main course. She asked the waiter to pack it to go and tipped him like $20. On the way out, she didn't even glance at her ex. The other girl was still there, looking confused and kind of scared. I felt a little bad for her, but mostly just stunned by how calculated all of it was. Outside, Nina lit a cigarette and asked if I wanted to go get a drink somewhere less fake. I said sure because honestly, at that point, I wanted to see where this chaos went. We ended up at some dive 2 blocks away, drinking gin and tonics, and playing darts with a couple regulars. She told me all about the guy, how they'd been together for over a year, and how he lied about everything from where he worked to who he was texting. She didn't cry, didn't even seem that angry, just determined, like this whole thing was just step 3 in a list of 5. By the end of the night, I didn't even care that I'd been used. She was smart, wild, and probably not someone I could ever keep up with long term. But still, it was one of the most interesting nights I'd had in a long time. We didn't kiss or anything when we said goodbye. She just said, thanks for being chill, and that was it. She never messaged me again, and I never reached out either. Some people are meant to be one-night stories, and she was definitely one of them. So this one was kind of my fault. I ignored every red flag before we even met because I was in that annoying phase where I was trying to be more open-minded. I'd just gotten out of something kind of boring and thought maybe dating someone totally outside of my type would be good for me. Like, that thing where you convince yourself chaos might actually be exciting. Yeah, that was me, full on delusional. Bradley messaged me the second we matched and hit me with this wall of emojis and phrases like vibes don't lie and grin set mode activated. I should have swiped left, but I didn't. His photos were mostly shirtless mirror selfies with motivational quotes overlaid in big block text. One of them literally said, "Winners work while others sleep." But again, I was in my say yes more era and figured, worst case, it'd give me something to talk about in the group chat. We agreed to meet for drinks on a Thursday at this rooftop spot he picked, which he said was his second office. I wasn't even sure what that meant, but I assumed it just meant he liked the place. When I got there, he was already waiting at the bar in this loud patterned shirt that looked like it had lost a fight with a highlighter. He gave me this huge hug like we'd known each other for years, and said something about the universe bringing the right people together. I laughed awkwardly and ordered a drink. The first 15 minutes weren't awful. He was confident, talked fast, and kept name-dropping cities like he'd lived in all of them. Miami, Austin, Bali, Dubai. I asked what he actually did, and he said, I help people unlock financial freedom, which told me absolutely nothing, but I let him keep going because, honestly, it was kind of entertaining. Then things took a turn. Somewhere between his second drink and his weird rant about how college is a scam, he pulled out his phone and said, you gotta see this. I figured maybe it'd be a meme or a video or something. But nope, it was a slideshow. An actual Google Slides presentation with animations and everything. He had made a pitch deck for me. It was titled, Why You Should Invest in the Crypto Lifestyle /Me. I'm not joking. That was the actual title. At first, I thought it was just some inside joke or meme he made to be funny. But nope. This man started clicking through the slides like he was in a boardroom. Slide 1 was a chart of crypto market growth since 2016. Slide 2 was a photo of him standing next to a rented Lamborghini with the caption, Vision Greater Than Sight. I couldn't even process what was happening fast enough. He was talking about staking in NFTs and something called passive yield generation, while I was just sitting there gripping my drink like it was the only real thing left in the world. Then came the slide about expansion. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I don't just want a girlfriend. I want a partner in profits. He said we could build an empire together, and that he was looking for someone who didn't just want to Netflix and chill, but wanted to innovate and scale. He said his last girlfriend couldn't handle the grind, and that he needed someone with vision. I didn't say anything because my brain was actively short-circuiting. And he asked if I had liquid assets. Like, that was his next question. I thought I misheard him, but then he started talking about how if I had even just $500 to deploy, we could double it in a month if we got in on a project he was watching. I asked what the project was, and he said it was still early stage, super underground, and that he couldn't give too many details unless I was serious. He even winked, like this was some Ocean's 11 omission. I told him I wasn't really into crypto, that I didn't have $500 lying around to throw at some mystery coin. He didn't even flinch. He said that mindset was why most people stayed broke. Then he pulled out his phone again and opened this app that was just a bunch of numbers and red lines and said, "See, this dip is the best time to get in." At this point, I was just trying to figure out how to leave without being rude or causing a scene. But then the waiter came by and asked if we wanted another round, and before I could say no, Bradley looked him dead in the eye and said, "Actually, she's investing in herself tonight. Put it on 2 checks. I swear I could hear my soul leave my body for a second." So I paid my tab, stood up, and said something vague like, "I should probably get going. I've got an early meeting." He gave me this nod like I just passed some sort of test, and said, "Let's manifest that next step, yeah." I didn't respond. I just smiled and walked straight out the door. On the way home, I read our chat history just to see if I missed something, some clue that he was gonna turn the night into a pitch meeting. But it was all just vague positivity and weird alpha male quotes. No warning signs beyond the obvious ones I ignored. I sent a voice note to my best friend explaining the whole thing, and she played it for our entire group chat. They were crying laughing. The next day, he messaged me a link to a YouTube video titled 10 Reasons You're Still Broke. No context, no follow-up, just the link. I didn't reply, but I did block him and every other guy on the app who had anything about hustle or financial freedom in their bio for like a month straight. Looking back, I'm not even mad. I kind of respect the dedication. The man came to the date with a pitch deck and a business plan. It's delusional, but at least it was original. Kind of. Prepare yourself for this one, people. It started on a random Thursday afternoon when I was procrastinating doing laundry. I just moved into this crappy little basement apartment and hadn't unpacked anything but my PlayStation and a bottle of hot sauce. I didn't even have a real bed yet, just a mattress on the floor and a folding chair as a nightstand. So naturally, instead of being productive, I was swiping through Tinder, convincing myself it counted as being social. That's when I matched with Romina. Her profile hit different. Like it wasn't all filters and staged travel shots. Her photos were mostly candid, one of her holding a cup of coffee with chipped nail polish, another of her laughing mid-blink in a group photo. She had this warm look to her, not in the flirty, fake compliment kind of way, but in a "this girl probably remembers your dog's name" kind of way. Her bio was just food greater than everything else. Convince me otherwise. We messaged for a few days, nothing deep, but she was funny and surprisingly direct. She asked if I wanted to get dinner that weekend, and I said yeah, mostly because it had been a while since I'd sat across from a real human at a table that wasn't virtual. She suggested this Pakistani restaurant I'd never heard of. Said it was her comfort place. I thought that meant like a spot she liked to eat at or something casual like that. I figured we'd get food, maybe a drink after, nothing intense. So I get there Saturday night a little early, and it's one of those cozy, family-owned spots tucked in between a laundromat and a vape shop. I walk in, and the host looks at me like she's been expecting me. She leads me to this table in the back and tells me to wait. So I sit, scrolling through my phone, not thinking much. And then Romina walks in. But she's not alone. Behind her are 2 older people, clearly her parents, dressed like they're attending someone's graduation dinner. Her mom's got pearls on, her dad's wearing this stiff blazer, and Romina's waving at me like everything is chill. She gets to the table, gives me this big smile, and says, "Hey, so sorry for the last minute thing. My parents really wanted to meet you." I legit thought she was joking, like maybe this was some elaborate prank or some weird TikTok trend I hadn't heard about. I laughed nervously and waited for her to say, "Just kidding." But she didn't. She pulled out a chair for her mom, sat down next to me, and started reading the menu out loud like this was the most normal thing in the world. Her parents nodded politely at me, said they were glad to finally meet me, and then immediately launched into small talk. Her dad asked what I did for work. Her mom asked if I had siblings. I was still trying to process what was happening while answering questions like I was on a job interview disguised as a dinner. Somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, her mom leaned over and said, "You have a very kind face. It's obvious you were raised well." I nodded awkwardly and took a big bite of naan to avoid having to speak. Eventually, Romina turned to me and quietly said, "Thanks for rolling with this. I'll explain after." So I sat there, eating biryani and pretending I wasn't having an existential crisis. After dinner, her parents finally left. Her mom kissed her on the cheek, her dad shook my hand way too seriously, and they walked off toward their car. As soon as they were out of earshot, I turned to her and asked, "What the hell just happened?" She let out this long sigh and said, "Okay, so my family's been on my case for like 2 years about getting married. There's this guy, he's technically my cousin, but not first cousin, it's complicated, and they've been pushing me to agree to this whole setup situation. I told them I was already dating someone serious just to get them off my back." I was sitting there, still chewing rice, just blinking like an idiot. She kept going. "I didn't expect them to want to meet you this soon, but when they said they were in town, I panicked and figured it'd be easier to just go with it. You seemed normal, so I thought you could handle it." That sentence hit me like a truck. You seemed normal, so I thought you could handle it. Like I was some kind of emotional stunt double. I asked her if she really told them I was her boyfriend, and she said, "Not directly, but kind of." I should have left right then, or at least been mad. But honestly, the absurdity of the whole thing was so strong that I just laughed. Like a full stupid laugh that came out of nowhere. She laughed too. We both just sat there in the restaurant parking lot, laughing like two people who just robbed a bank together and weren't sure if it worked. She'd offered to buy me dessert as a thank you. We went to this little ice cream stand nearby, and I got pistachio just to keep the chaos going. She told me more about the cousin thing. Apparently, it was some arrangement cooked up by two aunts at a wedding, and how her mom kept casually bringing him up like he was already part of the family. She said she just needed to prove she was moving forward with someone else so they'd finally drop it. I asked her what would have happened if I didn't show. She said she would have called an Uber driver inside and made him pretend. I believed her. We didn't kiss or anything that night. It wasn't that kind of vibe. It was more like we both survived some weird social escape room and made it out with minimal injuries. She texted me the next day saying, "Thanks again. My mom really liked you. Said you look stable." I had no clue what to do with that information, so I just said, "Glad I could be of service." We didn't really talk much after that. I think we both knew that was a one-time thing. Like, we play our parts. The mission was accomplished, and the curtain came down. I still think about it sometimes, though. How wild it is that someone out there probably still believes I'm in a committed relationship with their daughter, based solely on one dinner and a fake smile. I wasn't even supposed to be on Tinder. I deleted it like 4 times that month. Kept telling myself I was done with the apps. But then I had this long week. My roommate was out of town. I was eating leftover garlic bread straight out of the fridge while watching some show I didn't even like. You know, that kind of lonely where you don't want to talk. You just want to be seen. That's exactly where I was. So yeah, I re-downloaded Tinder again. That's when I matched with Chris. His profile was simple but confident, kind of like he knew he didn't have to try too hard. He had a couple pics in the mountains, one of him holding a coffee mug in a way that definitely wasn't candid, and a bio that just said, "I know what I want." Do you? At first I thought that was kind of intense, but after scrolling past 100 bios that just said, "Pizza is life," it actually stood out. Plus, his messages were decent. We direct, no weird pet names, and he didn't immediately ask me what I was looking for like it was a job interview. We talked for a few days. It was light, kind of flirtatious. He said he liked reading weird nonfiction books and going on drives at night with no destination. He told me he'd just gotten out of a messy thing a while back but didn't go into detail, and I didn't ask. We weren't trauma bonding, just chatting. He asked if I wanted to get drinks that Friday, and I figured why not. Worst case, I'd get a free beer and a story. We met at this pub on the edge of town, the kind with string lights on the ceiling and mismatched chairs. When I got there, he was already at the bar, sipping something dark and texting with one hand. He stood when he saw me and smiled, and honestly, he looked better in person. Clean cut, soft spoken, kind of that quiet cool. Not trying too hard, not performing. I was surprised how comfortable I felt within 5 minutes. The conversation was chill at first. Music in the background, the kind of ambient barn noise where no one's really listening to anyone else. He asked me about work. I told him I was stuck in a job I didn't love, but didn't hate enough to quit. He laughed and said he knew exactly what I meant. We talked about books, family travel. He seemed thoughtful. A little guarded, but not in a way that felt shady. Just selective. But somewhere around the second drink, the mood shifted. He started asking these weirdly deep questions out of nowhere. Stuff like, what do you think makes someone worth trusting? And do you believe in closure, or do you think people just pretend it exists to feel better? At first, I thought he was just trying to be philosophical, but it started feeling more pointed. Like he wasn't asking to get to know me, he was asking to test me. Then, completely out of nowhere, he said, I don't date just to date anymore. I date to teach lessons. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. But then he looked me dead in the eyes and said, no, I'm serious. He leaned back in his chair and said that after his last relationship ended, he realized how many women, and yet he said, women, not people, play games and never get held accountable. He said that his ex had wrecked him, made him feel disposable, and now he didn't see the point of getting close to someone if there wasn't something to gain. I had it froze. Not because I was scared or anything, but just because I wasn't sure what the hell I was hearing. He kept going. Said he'd been dating casually for the past year, but with intention. And by intention, he meant finding women who reminded him of his ex in some way and showing them what it feels like. I asked him flat out what that meant, and he said, I make them think it's something serious. I give them the kind of attention they act like they want, and then I disappear. He said it like it was this genius strategy, like he was proud of it. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me thought maybe he was just trying to push me away, like maybe he was into me and didn't want to risk something real. But the more he talked, the clearer it got that this wasn't a defense mechanism. This was a whole damn blueprint. He talked about how women never get held accountable, and how emotional consequences are the only thing that changes behavior. I felt like I was sitting across from someone who'd built a revenge playlist and just hit shuffle on every new date. I asked him if he ever thought about how that made him the exact kind of manipulator he claimed to hate. He shrugged and said, yeah, but at least I'm honest about it. The thing is, he was so calm. No raised voice, no bitterness in his tone. He talked about it like he was explaining how to do taxes. Just a flat, methodical explanation of how he dates now. He even said I seemed self-aware and probably wouldn't end up on the list. Like that was supposed to make me feel special or something. I finished my drink, told him I had to wake up early, and left before he could say anything else. He didn't follow me out, didn't text me later. It was like he already knew the script and didn't care if I stuck around for the rest. When I got home, I sat on the floor in my hoodie and just stared at my phone. Not because I was sad or confused, but because I couldn't stop thinking about how many other people he'd done that to. How many dates he'd gone on with this quiet, patient vibe, only to pull the rug out once they felt safe. I wasn't hurt. I barely knew the guy, but I felt weirdly gross. Like I'd been used for a social experiment I didn't sign up for. I'd never blocked him. Never messaged him again either. But I saw his profile a few weeks later with a new bio. Looking for something real or not. Depends on the night. Alright, so this whole thing started because I went on a little date a stranger every week challenge with myself after getting out of a long stretch of nothing but work and sleep. I wasn't heartbroken or looking to fall in love or anything. I just needed to get out of the cycle where my most exciting conversation of the day was with a guy at the deli who gives me extra pickles. That's it. So I got back on Tinder and decided I'd say yes to whoever didn't give me the ick in the first 5 messages. Megan was the second person I matched with that week. She had this huge smile in all her photos, the kind that looks like it takes over her whole face. Her bio said she was new-ish to the city, obsessed with bagels, and always down to split dessert. Her messages were straight up sunshine. She used too many exclamation points, but somehow made it work. It felt refreshing after scrolling through people who either sent one-word replies or wrote essays about crypto. We planned to meet at this breakfast spot I'd been wanting to try anyway, so even if she flaked, at least I'd get pancakes out of it. She didn't flake. She showed up 5 minutes early in this giant beige coat and pink sneakers, and waved like we'd already met before. I'm not gonna lie, the vibe was immediately good. She was one of those people who makes you feel like you're in a rom-com just from how animated she is. She talked with her hands, asked a lot of questions, and genuinely seemed excited about the menu. Over pancakes and coffee, she told me about how she moved here from Brazil a year ago. Said she loved it so far, but that the winters made her want to cry. She talked about her old apartment, how she missed her grandma's cooking, and how hard it was to find decent pão de queijo here. I was into it. She had this energy like everything was slightly chaotic, but in a fun way. Not the kind of person who'd ghost or overshare by text, just someone who kind of tumbled through life with a smile. The first weird thing she said didn't even register as weird at first. We were talking about roommates, and she said something like, "Yeah, I hope I can find a new place soon. Gotta start locking things down now that I'm getting more settled." I asked if she meant a new job or something, and she said, "No, just like a more stable situation, things that help you stick around." Didn't think much of it at the time, but then after breakfast, we went for a walk through the park nearby. She kept dropping these low comments about how hard it is to stay in the country without a real plan, and how she hated the idea of having to go back before she was done experiencing everything here. Again, didn't think much of it. I just figured she was venting, being honest. She wasn't being dramatic, just kind of hinting around the topic like she didn't want to say something out loud. We hung out a few more times after that. Got boba once. Watched a movie at her place where the subtitles didn't match the audio, and she kept making jokes about how this one sentence could mean four things depending on tone. Stuff was chill, casual. She was fun to be around and didn't come with any of the usual weird Tinder baggage. Or so I thought. The fourth time we hung out, we were sitting at my couch eating takeout, watching old reality TV clips on YouTube. Out of nowhere, she paused the video and looked at me and said, "Can I ask you something kind of weird?" I said sure, expecting something dumb or funny. But instead she goes, "Would you ever do a paper marriage?" I just blinked. Like, for a solid 3 seconds, I couldn't even process what she meant. I thought maybe I misheard her or she was quoting a show. So I asked her what she meant, and she just straight up said it. Like just for a couple years. Just to help me stay. You wouldn't have to do anything except sign. I'd pay for everything. I laughed at first, like a nervous, confused laugh. She didn't laugh. She was dead serious. She pulled out her phone and opened this doc with a whole breakdown of how it would work. Rent payments, tax paperwork, even a calendar with made-up anniversaries and fake photo ops. She planned it out. She said she wasn't asking me to actually be with her like that. Just pretend. Said it'd be easy. I wouldn't have to move in or even meet anyone unless I wanted to. She said she'd even pay me $700 a month for the trouble. That's when it hit me that this wasn't some vague idea she'd been tossing around. This was a pitch, like she'd done this before or at least practiced saying it in the mirror a few times. I told her I didn't think I could do that. She didn't get upset, but she did try to sell me on it harder. Said I seemed trustworthy, that I didn't seem like someone who would screw her over, and that she'd rather do this with someone she liked. She said it wouldn't be forever, just until she could find a job that would sponsor her or until she could apply on her own. And she said we could stop hanging out if it made things weird. I didn't know what to say. I told her I needed to think. She nodded and packed up her stuff and left like she hadn't just asked me to fake a marriage with her. No drama, no pressure. Just okay, let me know. I sat there for like an hour just staring at my ceiling. Not even because I was mad, but because I couldn't tell if I should be flattered or insulted. Like, did she pick me because she trusted me? Or because I seemed like someone easy to convince? She texted me a few days later, said she understood if I wasn't cool with it, and that it was just an idea. I never replied. Not because I hated her or thought she was some scammer or whatever. I just didn't know how to come back from that. I don't think you can. I still see her sometimes on my people you may know lists. Still smiling. Still eating desserts in every photo. And every time I do, I wonder who ended up saying yes. I never really cared for dating apps, but I started using them again because my mom kept asking if I was seeing anyone, and I got tired of lying about imaginary girls who lived in other cities. I wasn't lonely or desperate or anything like that. I just wanted someone to go to brunch with on weekends and complain about the city's parking situation. Just regular stuff. I matched with Kevin on a Wednesday, which already felt cursed. Wednesday is not a romantic day. Nothing cool has ever started on a Wednesday. But his profile was decent. He had a beard that looked maintained, a nice smile, and a few shots of him playing with his dog at what looked like a park, and not just some random patch of grass. His bio said he worked in UX design and loved spicy food, hiking, and open communication. That last part stuck with me, but I didn't think too hard about it at the time. He messaged me first, which I liked. I hate doing the opening line dance. His opener was solid. He asked me about a random TV show I mentioned in my bio, and we started talking from there. He was funny in a dry way, kind of sarcastic, but not rude. The conversation flowed easy, and by Friday we had a date set. He picked this bar downtown with string lights and live music, the kind of place that tries a little too hard, but somehow pulls it off. He was already there when I walked in, standing by the bar with 2 drinks in hand, that look people get when they're scanning a room for someone they'd only see in photos. I waved. He smiled, handed me one of the drinks, and said he hoped I liked whiskey. I did. Things were off to a good start. We got a table outside near a heat lamp, and everything felt kind of easy. He was a good listener, made eye contact without being creepy, and told stories in a way that made them sound way more interesting than they probably were. He asked me a lot of questions, but it didn't feel like an interrogation. He seemed genuinely curious about stuff like my hometown, my sister's weird job at Jelly Bean Company, and whether or not I thought all pets have personalities or if we're just projecting. I liked him. About an hour in, the conversation drifted into past relationships. Not in a heavy way, just casually. I asked him how long he'd been single, and he hesitated, took a sip of his drink, then said, "Well, technically I'm not." My stomach did this tiny lurch. I asked what that meant, and he said, "I have a girlfriend, but we're exploring openness." I nodded slowly, trying to play it cool, but inside my brain was already sprinting in 5 directions. I asked if they were new to it or if it had been an ongoing thing, and he said, "It's pretty new." And he said something that didn't sit right. She doesn't really want to know about the details yet. It's more like a soft launch. A soft launch, like we were an app update. I asked, "Wait, so she knows, right?" He nodded, kind of, then added, "She knows we're talking about it. It's a process." That's when the little voice in my head started whispering, "She doesn't know. She definitely doesn't know." I tried to stay neutral. I asked questions mostly just to get a better read on the situation. He told me they'd been together for over a year and things had gotten a little stagnant. He said he brought up opening the relationship a few times and she was warming up to the idea, but didn't want to hear about who he was seeing or what he was doing yet. Said he was taking space respectfully. At that point, I stopped sipping my drink, not because I was trying to make a scene or anything, but because I didn't want anything about this night to go further than it already had. I asked him why he was on Tinder if things weren't totally clear yet. He said he was testing the waters, and that's when I realized this guy wasn't poly or open or any of that. He was just cheating with extra steps. He said something about how he didn't want to lie, and that's why he was being upfront now. I gave him a look and said, "You're not being upfront if she doesn't know." He smiled, this weird, half-defensive smile, and said, "It's complicated." I hate that phrase. Nothing kills a conversation faster than "it's complicated." It's a blanket excuse for people who want to do whatever they want without having to explain themselves. He wasn't navigating anything. He was just hoping I'd go along with it quietly and not ask questions. He tried to pivot the conversation after that, asked me something about my favorite city I ever visited, but it was already ruined. I wasn't mad, just done. He wasn't aggressive or creepy, just incredibly selfish with a coat of fake honesty on top. I told him I was gonna head out. He didn't try to stop me. Just said it was nice meeting me and that he respected my boundaries. I left without finishing my drink. On the train ride home, I couldn't stop thinking about his girlfriend. Like she was probably sitting at home thinking they were working on things, maybe even hopeful. And here he was, sipping whiskey with strangers and calling it a soft launch. I almost wanted to message her and tell her what he was doing, but I didn't know how to even begin that. So I just blocked him and deleted Tinder again. For real this time, probably. I don't think I'll get it much anymore, but I do think about the way people justify their garbage by calling it growth. Exploring openness isn't the problem. Lying about it is, and this dude was basically a walking loophole. The only reason I even ended up on this date was because I was trying to get over this girl who ghosted me after 3 months of texting every day. No real closure, no drama, just gone. So I gave myself a pep talk, made a new playlist, re-downloaded Tinder, and promised I wouldn't take anything too seriously. I'd even told myself I'd be chill about the first person who said something weird, like maybe I'd just roll with it instead of overthinking. That was a mistake. I matched with Adriana late on a Sunday night. Her first message was literally, "Let's skip the small talk," which should have been my warning, but I kind of liked the directness. Her profile said she worked in early childhood education, loved mango smoothies, and was looking for someone real, someone grown. I thought maybe she'd be fun in a no-nonsense kind of way. Her photos were cute, messy bun, big glasses, laughing with a book in her hand. The vibe was very low-key adulting. I figured worst case I'd get coffee and an awkward story. We didn't talk for long before she suggested meeting up. She picked a park, which felt a little random for a first date, but I told myself to be open. She said she preferred daytime energy and didn't like bars. Fair enough. I was picturing a walk, maybe iced coffee, maybe sitting on a bench and swapping embarrassing childhood stories. Something simple. I got there a few minutes early. It was one of those parks with too many pigeons and not enough trash cans. There were kids on scooters flying around with zero supervision, and some guy was trying to do yoga next to a tree that had bird poop on it. I texted her that I was near the fountain. She said, "Be there in 5. Look for the stroller." I read that twice before it sank in. I thought maybe she was babysitting, or helping her sister, or had a really weird sense of humor. I turned around and saw her walking toward me, pushing a full stroller like this was completely normal. She waved with one hand, had a diaper bag over her shoulder, and smiled like we were on our third date, not our first. I didn't know what to say, so I just waved back. When she got to me, she said, "Hope this is okay." I figured we might as well cut through the nonsense. She pulled the stroller next to the bench and sat down like this was just another Tuesday. The kid was asleep, wearing a tiny bucket hat and socks with ducks on them. I said something lame like, "Oh, you brought your kid." And she nodded and said, "Yeah, I don't like wasting time. Most guys freak out when they find out I have a kid, so I stopped hiding it. I bring him. That way I know right away if they're weird about it." I didn't know what to do with that information. I wasn't against people having kids or anything. I just wasn't expecting a whole baby on the date, and definitely not as part of some live-action character test. She handed me a juice pouch and said, "We can still talk. He sleeps hard once he's out." I took it because I didn't know what else to do. So there I was sitting on a park bench, holding an unopened juice pouch while a stranger's baby snored next to me in a stroller. We started talking, and to be honest, she was cool. Like, way cooler than I expected for someone who just ambushed me with a child. She was smart, funny, super confident. Told me she was a single mom by choice, meaning she knew what she signed up for, and wasn't looking for anyone to save her or play stepdad. She just wanted someone who wasn't afraid of real life. Said she got tired of pretending like she didn't have a kid just to make dates easier. The more she talked, the more I understood where she was coming from. But at the same time, it felt unfair. I hadn't signed up for a surprise parenting evaluation. I asked her if she always brought her son on first dates, and she said, "Not always. But if I think the guy seems soft, yeah." She called it her early screening process. She asked if I wanted to hold him. I panicked and said, "I think I'm good." She laughed and said, "See, that's why I do this." We sat for maybe 40 minutes. The baby eventually woke up, and she gave him a snack cup full of cereal and kissed the top of his head like it was the most natural thing in the world. Watching her like that, I kind of respected her more. She wasn't hiding anything. No mask, no pretending. But at the same time, I didn't know if I was someone who could deal with that level of honesty that fast. As we were wrapping up, she asked if I'd want to hang out again. I didn't have a clean answer. I told her I needed to think about it. She smiled and said, "That's fair. Most people aren't ready." Then she packed up the stroller like a pro, waved, and headed off down the path with the baby chewing on his cereal like nothing happened. I stood there for a while after, just staring at the juice pouch still in my hand. She texted later that night saying it was nice to meet me, and that I seemed emotionally honest. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't like her. I did. But because I didn't know how to be that honest back. We never talked again. Every time I pass that park now, I look at the benches and wonder how many other guys have sat there thinking it was just gonna be a coffee date, only to end up getting silently evaluated by a baby in a duck hat. This one actually started kind of slow, like not in a boring way, but in that you don't realize you're walking into something weird until it's way too late to back out kind of way. I matched with Andrew on a night when I couldn't sleep, just flipping through profiles like they were TV channels. His bio was short, just said he was a teacher and likes things that are underrated. I didn't think anything of it at the time. His pictures were normal, like painfully normal. Cactus, button-up shirts, a selfie in his car with a travel mug. The kind of guy who probably irons his bedsheets and eats dinner at the same time every night. Not my usual type, but after going on 3 dates in a row with dudes who thought sarcasm was a personality, I figured maybe boring wouldn't be the worst thing. He messaged first, said I looked familiar. I figured it was just a line. People say that all the time. I told him I get that a lot, and he replied, maybe I've seen you around campus, which was weird because I graduated over a year ago. I told him that, and he said, oh, maybe I just remember your face from somewhere. Sorry, I have one of those teacher brains. That made me pause for like half a second, but again, I brushed it off. We talked for a couple days, nothing too deep. Just surface stuff, food, music, the usual what are you binge watching right now conversations. He told me he taught English at a high school in the area and said he loved his job because he got to shape minds without the office drama. I thought that was kind of cheesy, but whatever, at least it wasn't crypto. He asked me out for coffee. Said he didn't really like drinking and preferred quiet places where he could actually hear the person talking, which honestly sounded like a dream after the last guy who took me to a club and lost me in the crowd twice. So we met at this coffee shop not too far from the old high school, which, yeah, hindsight. I showed a little early. He got there 2 minutes after, holding a book like it was a prop. Sat down, complimented my jacket, and said again, I swear you look so familiar. I gave a tight smile and told him maybe I just have one of those faces. Again. This time he said, did you go to Easton High? That's when I finally paused. I told him yeah, and he smiled like he just won a game. Said he taught there for the past 6 years. Then he said, I think I had you in one of my English electives. My stomach did this thing. Not a drop, not a jump, just a weird kind of twist. I told him I didn't remember ever having him, and he shrugged and said maybe he just passed me in the halls or saw me around. The rest of the conversation was fine. Normal. But I couldn't stop turning that comment over in my head. Like, had he swiped on me because he knew I went to that school? Was that why I looked familiar? I asked what year he started teaching there and did the math in my head. Yeah, he would have been there when I was a senior, maybe even my junior year. He started naming other teachers like we were playing 6 Degrees of Separation, and I just kept nodding, thinking of every hallway, every assembly, every time I sat in the back of a classroom wondering who these adults were. He said, it's kind of cool seeing where former students end up. I didn't even know what to say to that. I said I didn't think I was one of his students, and he said, still same building, same memories. Then it got weirder. He told me he'd actually run into a few girls from the school on Tinder before, and he liked seeing them all grown up. I tried not to react, but I felt myself stiffen. He said, obviously I wouldn't talk to anyone while they were still enrolled. I'm not crazy. But after graduation, it's fair game. Fair game. I asked him flat out. So you match with people you might have seen walking around your school, and you don't think that's kind of weird? He smiled. Didn't even flinch. Said, it's not like I'm preying on kids. These are adults now. It's a small city. Paths cross. I sat there holding my iced latte like it might give me a way out of the conversation. My brain was spinning. He didn't say anything aggressive or illegal, not technically. But something about the way he said grown up and fair game made my skin crawl. He kept going totally calm. Told me he dated a girl 2 years younger than me who'd also gone to Easton. Said it was cool catching up on what's changed since then. Like he was reconnecting with long-lost coworkers and not former students he used to see walking to class in sweatshirts and backpacks. I wanted to leave right then, but he was still talking about his favorite authors. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just revealed this whole unsettling pattern he seemed proud of. I finished my drinks, said I had to meet a friend, and stood up. He smiled and said it was great talking, and that he'd love to hang again soon. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do, then walked out so fast I almost forgot to toss my cup in the trash. He messaged me that night with a photo of a book and said, you love this one. The main character reminds me of you. I blocked him immediately. I told her my friends about it later, and she just said, you Mr. Andrews. Yeah, I had him sophomore year. My stomach sank. She said he used to linger in the halls between classes and remember everyone's names even when he didn't teach them. I don't know if what he was doing technically broke any rules, but it felt gross. Like he'd spent years watching kids grow up, and now he was just waiting until it was legal. Anyway, I don't go near the coffee shop anymore. This one didn't feel off right away. If anything, it started way too normal, like sitcom normal. You know when you match with someone and you both type, hey at the same time, then one of you says something corny like jinx. It was like that. Easy flow, light flirting. Her name was Brittany, and her profile had just enough info to make her seem interesting, but not in that try-hard way where people write essays about loving dogs and being emotionally available. She just had a couple of good photos. One at a concert, one with a dumb peace sign, and a bio that said, I once cried in public over a bagel and I'm not ashamed. She seemed funny and self-aware, and I figured if she was willing to admit something like that, she'd probably be cool in real life. We decided to meet for drinks after a few days of texting. No big build-up, no overthinking. She suggested a low-key bar that did trivia on Wednesdays, and I was into it. It had been a while since I'd gone out with someone who actually planned the thing instead of just saying, "Ik you pick." I got there early and grabbed a booth. The place was mostly empty except for a group of regulars at the bar and a couple arguing quietly near the dartboard. I was halfway through my first drink when I saw her walk in. She was shorter than I expected, wearing a giant hoodie and leggings like she came straight from lounging at home. I liked that. No pretense, no awkward heels or overdone makeup. She spotted me, smiled, and slid into the booth like we'd done this before. She looked at me for a second, not like your cute kind of looking, more like trying to place me. I chalked it up to nerves or bad lighting. But then she tilted her head and said, I feel like I know you from somewhere. I laughed, said maybe I just had one of those faces. But in my head, something twitched a little. It wasn't the first time someone had said that, but the way she said it had weight to it, like she was really seriously trying to place it. She shrugged and we moved on. Ordered drinks. Started talking about music, bad dates, favorite snacks. She told me about her weird job editing closed captions for corporate training videos and how she sometimes added jokes into drafts that no one ever noticed. I told her about my old roommate who collected stolen salt shakers. She laughed hard and snorted a little, which honestly just made her seem more real. Everything felt easy, except for this weird little pause every now and then where she kind of stared at me, not in a flirty way, just studying me. Midway through the second round, trivia started and we joined in just for fun. We lost almost immediately, but it gave us something to joke about. She seemed genuinely into the night, laughing, engaged, playful. At one point, I remember thinking, and this might actually turn into something. I hadn't had that thought in months. Then, toward the end of the night, right when we were finishing up and the bartender was closing tabs, she leaned in a little and said, Okay, I have to tell you something. It's kind of weird. My stomach dipped just slightly. That sentence never ends well. She kept her voice low, almost like she didn't want the booth behind us to hear. She said, I think I know where I know you from. You used to go to that group therapy circle at that clinic on 10th and Harper, right? Like, last year. My brain didn't even register it at first. I just stared at her, blinking. Then she said, You talked about the breakup and your whole thing with your brother. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. We were in the same group. I froze, like physically froze. She kept talking like she needed to explain before I could process it. She said she'd joined that therapy circle for a couple months during a rough patch, and she remembered me because of a story I had told once about feeling like a placeholder in someone's life. Said it stuck with her, that she didn't realize it was me until halfway through the night, and that she wasn't trying to be creepy, but once she made the connection, she didn't know how to say it right away. I was still frozen. Not angry, not scared, just massively uncomfortable. I hadn't thought about that therapy group in a while. It was one of those short-term circles where everyone sat in a room full of folding chairs and took turns not making eye contact. I barely spoke most weeks. When I did, I didn't think anyone was really listening. That was kind of the point. It felt like a vacuum you could toss words into without consequences. But now someone was sitting across from me quoting it back like it was a podcast she rediscovered. She said she found me on Tinder a few weeks back and recognized my face but wasn't sure. Swiped right because part of her was curious. Said she figured if we matched, maybe it was fate or something dumb like that. I asked her if she'd ever planned to tell me. She hesitated, then said, I wasn't sure, but tonight you seemed the same. Like you, not just the guy from the circle. So I figured it was better to be honest. I nodded, but I felt this weird weight in my chest, like my past had just walked through a door I'd already locked. We didn't hang out after that. We walked outside, said goodnight politely, and went separate directions. She texted the next day saying she'd hope I didn't think she was stalking me. I didn't reply. Not because I thought she was, but because I didn't know how to explain the feeling of someone remembering the version of you that only shows up when everything's falling apart. It wasn't about trust, or even privacy. It was about space, and how she took up space in a part of my life that wasn't meant for anyone to bring into a bar over trivia night. I deleted Tinder again after that. I wasn't trying to fall in love or anything. I was just bored and mildly underwhelmed with life. My job was fine but felt pointless. I was living with two roommates who thought the trash took itself out, and I spent the past 3 weekends rotating between the same 3 cabs pretending I was being productive. Tinder was kind of a background app at that point. Like, I'd open it when I was stuck in traffic or waiting for the microwave to finish. That's how that happened. His profile didn't scream anything special. A couple gym pics, one of him in a button-up at a wedding, and the classic me hiking, but I didn't crop my ex out very well photo. His bio said something like, looking for something fun and low-key. Bonus if you love spreadsheets. I thought he was being ironic. Spoiler, he was not. He messaged me first, which was rare. It was some nervy joke about algorithms I didn't fully get, but I appreciated the effort. He had that kind of brainy confidence. The kind of guy who probably played chess in high school, but now drinks protein shakes and watches productivity YouTubers before bed. It was weirdly charming. After a few days of texting about music, the best kind of peanut butter, crunchy obviously, and how neither of us understood TikTok trends anymore, he asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I said yes mostly because I'd gone on 2 back-to-back dates that felt like job interviews, and I figured, at the very least, Matt would be interesting. He picked this place near downtown that tried to pass itself off as a speakeasy, but really just had a broken neon sign and expensive cocktails with names like the Suffering Librarian. I walked in and he was already there, typing something on his phone like he was solving a minor crisis. He stood up when he saw me, gave me this big smile, and said I looked exactly like my photos, which again, should be a given but somehow feels like a compliment in dating app world. We ordered drinks, found a booth, and the convo flowed pretty easily. He talked fast, but not in an annoying way. More like he had too many thoughts and not enough time to say them. He told me about his job in data analytics, how he worked for a health tech startup and spent most of his day trying to make graphs behave. I pretended to understand and said something vaguely smart-sounding, which seemed to work. Then we got into dating. Just general stuff. Past horror stories, awkward matches, the usual. I told him about the guy who took me to a fast food parking lot for a surprise, which turned out to be just eating nuggets in his car while his ex texted him nonstop. Matt laughed and said, at least he had data. I mean, nuggets are a strong first impression. That's when I should have known. I really should have. Because then he said, completely casually, so I actually track all my dates in a spreadsheet. I laughed, like really laughed. Thought it was a joke. I asked if that was just a weird way of saying he had a notes app full of random names. But he just sipped his drink and said, no, it's a real spreadsheet, with categories. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few things, and then spun it around on the table like he was showing me vacation photos. And there it was. A whole color-coded Google sheet, with tabs, multiple tabs. I stared at it, thinking I'd misunderstood. But nope. It was exactly what it looked like. A fully built-out document of every girl he'd dated since the start of the year. There were columns for name, age, job, star sign, intro energy, texting vibe, banter rating, and, I swear to whatever's holy, a final column called obedience score. That one had a footnote explaining it was based on how chill they were with going along with plans. I sat there just blinking, like a browser tab that stopped responding. He kept scrolling like it was nothing. Showed me my entry, yes, I had an entry, and said I haven't filled all of yours out yet, but the early data is looking good. I didn't even know how to respond. I asked, is this a joke? He looked genuinely confused. Said, "No, why would it be? It helps me stay organized." I think about that spreadsheet sometimes, like, is it still growing? As he added new tabs, did someone else score a perfect 10 on banter? Is there a conditional formatting rule for emotional availability? I told him it felt kind of dehumanizing. He said he wasn't sharing the sheet with anyone, so it wasn't like I was being exploited, just analyzed. I stared at my drink, I stared at him, I stared at the chart. Then I asked him if he thought maybe, just maybe, this was a weird thing to do. He shrugged and said, "We track everything else. Why not dating?" I said, "Because people aren't metrics." And this man said, "Disagree." He wasn't even defensive. That's the part that stuck with me. He truly didn't see anything wrong with it. It was like he thought the spreadsheet was this smart life hack and not a completely unhinged violation of basic respect. He said, "This is kind of an important part of the vetting process for me. I'm not looking to waste time." I told him I wasn't either, which is exactly why I wasn't sticking around for a second drink. He didn't argue. Just nodded like I confirmed some line item and said, "Hit. Not everyone appreciates structure." I left, went home, told my roommate, who literally fell off the couch laughing. The next day, he sent me a message that just said, "No hard feelings. Your sarcasm rating was a 9, by the way." I didn't reply, obviously. I don't even know how to start this one without sounding like I'm making it up, but I swear this happened. Like fully 100% real, not exaggerated, not twisted for drama. Just a normal guy trying to meet a cool girl on a weeknight and accidentally ending up on the internet, against my will. I matched with Ashley on a Tuesday while waiting for my takeout. She had one of those profiles that felt like it had personality, but not in a forced way. Her bio said chronically online, but still grounded, which made me laugh, and her pictures had this chaotic energy. One at an arcade, one where she's holding a raccoon, and one where she's pretending to sing into a banana like a mic. I couldn't tell if she was unhinged or just very funny, but either way I was curious. We started messaging that night, and she was quick with replies, like lightning fast. She had that kind of texting rhythm where you feel like you're in a back and forth, even if it's 10 p.m. and you're both half watching something else. She was clever too. Sharp jokes, random gifts, weird would you rathers that actually made me think. I liked it. She didn't ask dumb stuff like, "What you doing?" or try to be too deep either. She asked me once if I believed in parallel universes, and when I said yes, she said, "Cool. Somewhere out there, you're a lizard in sunglasses and I'm interviewing you on a podcast." I didn't know what that meant, but I liked it. She suggested we meet up for drinks on Thursday. Picked a dive bar I'd never been to, said it was a vibe. I said cool, and she sent a winky face and a YouTube link to an 80s song with zero context. Again, I just went with it. I got there first and grabbed a table near the back, the kind of spot that felt private enough for a first date. The place wasn't packed, just a few people scattered around, mostly regulars judging my bartender knowing everyone's name. Ashley walked in wearing this oversized denim jacket covered in random patches, and these chunky boots that made her look taller than in her pics. She waved before even making eye contact, like she knew exactly where I'd be. Sat down across from me, smiled big, and said, "You look different in motion. That's not a bad thing." I had no idea what that meant, but I laughed anyway. The first 20 minutes were chill. We ordered drinks, talked about the weirdest pets we'd ever seen. She once met a guy with a pet skunk, apparently. And then she asked me what kind of apocalypse I thought I'd survive best. I told her I'd be useless in a zombie one, but I might do okay in some kind of low-tech reset where everyone had to trade things like batteries and soup. She said she'd run a pirate radio station and play only Carly Rae Jepsen deep cuts. It was genuinely a fun time. Then I noticed something weird. She kept glancing at her phone. Not in the casual, checking a text kind of way. Like, full on tapping and tilting it slightly, like she was adjusting something. I figured maybe she was just nervous or trying to keep notes on some mental checklist. But then I caught her phone sitting face up next to her drink, and the screen was still on. There was this little red dot in the corner, and then it hit me. She was live streaming. I asked, "Are you filming this?" She looked up, didn't even flinch, and said, "Oh, yeah, kinda. Just for a challenge thing." I sat there blinking like I just glitched. She picked up her phone, flipped it toward me real casual, and said, "Say hi to my followers." There were comments rolling in, like fast. I didn't read all of them, but I caught stuff like "he looks confused, lol," and "give him the hot sauce question." I was stunned, like truly didn't know what to say. She explained like it was no big deal, that she was doing this 31st dates in 30 days challenge for her TikTok and Twitch channels. She said it was mostly for fun, and she didn't use names or show faces unless people gave permission. Said it was an experiment in chemistry, vibes, and unscripted chaos. I asked if she always streamed the entire date. She nodded and said, "Yeah, I have a little audience that loves watching real interactions. It's not creepy. I promise. I blur stuff later if it's too personal." I didn't even know how to respond to that. Like, yeah, I could have just walked out right there, but I was too deep in it. I felt like a zoo animal who just realized people had been watching through the glass the whole time. She offered to turn it off. Said she usually told people ahead of time, but she was getting better reactions when they didn't know. That sentence stuck in my head like a siren. I asked her, "So you just use real people for content?" She tilted her head and said, "Well, aren't all first dates kind of performance anyway?" I didn't answer. I was too busy wondering how many people were watching me sit there trying not to look like I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. She ended the stream about 10 minutes later, said the energy shift was too strong, and she didn't want to force it. She winked when she said that. I didn't wink back. The rest of the night was weirdly quiet. We both kind of knew it was over. She paid for her drink, thanked me for being a good sport, and said maybe I'd go viral in a wholesome way. I said I hoped not. She messaged me 2 days later with a clip. Said she edited it to cut my face out and just use the audio. I didn't even click it. Just replied with a thumbs up and blocked her. I still don't know how many people saw me, or what they thought, or if they even cared. But every time I go on a date now, I find myself looking around the table for red dots. Alright, so here's the thing. I don't usually say yes to guys who have zero bio and only 3 photos, especially when one of them is just a picture of their car dashboard with a song playing. But Dylan had messaged me something genuinely funny about one of my prompts. Something about how the only right answer to best pizza topping was garlic and shame. And I laughed, so I figured fine. Let's just see. He was polite in messages. No weird emojis, no babe after 10 minutes, and he didn't hit me with a "so what are you looking for" right away. He asked normal questions like what kind of neighborhood I live in, whether I preferred crunchy or soft cookies, and if I'd ever been to that weird bookstore that smells like incense and old sweaters. Nothing intense, nothing flirty in a way that made me uncomfortable. Just normal. After a few days, he said he wanted to meet up. Told me there was a good Vietnamese spot near his place. I said sure, that was free Friday, and he replied, "Perfect, dinner at 7." Then, like a few minutes later, he sent another message that said, "Actually, are you Wookie doing something kind of different? My parents are doing a dinner thing at their place, and I was supposed to bring someone. It's casual, just food and some drinks. You wouldn't have to stay long." I sat there rereading that message 3 times. I thought maybe he was joking. Who takes a Tinder date to meet their parents on the first date? But he added, "Totally get it if that's weird. No pressure." So I asked if it was like a holiday thing or someone's birthday, and he said no, just a regular Friday family dinner. Nothing serious, he said. Just chill. I should have said no. Honestly, every logical part of my brain said no, but for some reason I was curious. Like, what kind of guy even thinks to do that? So I said yes. Told myself I'd stay for like an hour, be polite, and then dip. Friday comes and he sends me the address, which was in the suburbs. Not far, but far enough that I started wondering why I was doing this. He offered to meet me outside since the house might be hard to spot. I got there and he was standing by the driveway, wearing a button-up shirt and holding what looked like a bottle of wine. He smiled and waved like we'd known each other for months. We walked in and the house was full. Like, more than just his parents. There were cousins and aunt, some guy playing music from a speaker in the corner. A big table set up buffet style, lots of voices, lots of smells. It was overwhelming but kind of cozy. The kind of gathering where no one's wearing shoes and everyone's trying to feed you. Dylan introduced me to his parents first. His mom hugged me. His dad shook my hand and said, "Nice to see Dylan bringing someone new around." That stuck out to me, but I didn't say anything. For the next 20 minutes, we did the small talk thing. His mom asked me what I did, where my family's from, if I like spicy food. I smiled and answered everything like I wasn't internally spiraling about why I was there. And then it hit me. About halfway through dinner, one of the cousins asked Dylan, loud enough for the table, "Is this the one you were telling us about?" And Dylan, while chewing, said, "Yup, see. Told you." I turned my head. I gave him that sideways look like, "What are you talking about?" Later, when we were off to the side, I finally asked him what that meant. He got quiet and said, "Okay, don't take this the wrong way, but I kind of needed my parents to see me with someone, not for our background." I was like, "Sorry, what?" He explained, casually, like this was just a thing people do, that his parents had been pressuring him for months to settle down with someone from their own culture. That every time he showed up to dinner solo, his aunt would bring up some nice girl they wanted him to meet. So he figured the best way to shut it down was to show up with someone who clearly didn't fit the mold. Someone different. Someone like me. He said I seemed cool, and since we'd been talking anyway, he thought it wouldn't be that weird. Like it'd just be a bonus favor. I stood there staring at him, plate in hand, while behind me his dad poured tea and his mom complimented my earrings to someone in another room. He said again, "You're cool with this, right?" I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I told him very calmly that maybe giving someone a heads up before using them as a pawn in a family scheme would have been smart. He said, "I wasn't using you, it's not like that," which is exactly what someone says when it's exactly like that. I stayed for another 10 minutes, mostly out of politeness, and because his mom asked me to try her homemade dessert. It was good too, like frustratingly good. I told her it was delicious, and she smiled so big it made my chest ache a little. She was so nice, and I knew she had no idea what Dallin was doing. When I left, I said goodbye to everyone, smiled through it, and walked out into the night trying not to feel like a prop in someone else's family drama. Dylan texted me the next morning saying his mom really liked me and that I played the part perfectly. I blocked him without answering. And now whenever someone says, "family dinner too early in conversation," I get flashbacks of standing in a living room full of strangers who thought they were witnessing the start of something real. Meanwhile, I was just the plot twist. This wasn't even a real date to me at first. I wasn't on Tinder to meet someone. I was just on there because I deleted Instagram and needed something to scroll through while I waited for my laundry. It was background noise. I wasn't putting in effort or filtering bios or deep diving into vibes. Just swiping like it was a minigame to kill time. I matched with Janely on a Tuesday night. I read her message while sitting on my bedroom floor eating cold pasta out of a plastic container. It just said, "You look like you got stories." That was it. No emoji, no awkward pickup line, just that. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "Maybe," and she replied of the time and the place. No, hey, no small talk. Just come to this cafe on Thursday. I'll be in the corner. I almost didn't go. Something about it felt weird. But it was a small coffee spot a few blocks from where I live, and I figured worst case, it'd be an awkward drink and a quiet walk home. I was tired of texting. I wanted something tactile. A real voice, a real table, something I could look at without squinting at a screen. She was already there when I showed up. Sitting in the corner with her back to the wall, one leg crossed over the other, notebook on the table. Not a laptop. An actual notebook. She was wearing all black except for these ridiculous bright yellow sneakers, and she looked up at me like she'd already been watching for a while. "You came," she said. I said, "You told me to." She smiled like that was the exact answer she'd been expecting and slid an extra coffee across the table. "I guessed your order," she said. It was close enough that I didn't complain. We didn't talk like normal people. No, what do you doze or where are you froms? She just asked questions, one after another, like it was a game. Stuff like, what's the first memory you'd erase if you could? Or if you had to disappear forever tomorrow, where would you go? I answered them because I didn't know what else to do. She was good at it, pulling stuff out of me without making it feel invasive. I don't remember everything I said, but I know at one point I was talking about a fight I had with my brother 3 years ago and how we haven't spoken since. I never tell people that, but with her, it felt like the only thing I could say. When she talked, it was like she was narrating a documentary that hadn't been made yet. Everything she said sounded planned but not rehearsed, like she'd been thinking it in her head for days and was just waiting for someone to hear it out loud. About halfway through, I asked what she did for work. She tilted her head and said, "I'm a writer." I nodded. Of course she was. Then I asked what she wrote about. She smiled in this way that didn't reach her eyes and said, "People." I asked if that meant fiction or journalism or what. She just said, "Yes." At that point, I should have known. Or maybe I did. But I was already too far in to back out. But I didn't ask more. I just kept drinking my coffee and letting her ask whatever she wanted. When we finished, she said she had to go but wanted to show me something first. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her notebook and handed it to me. At the top it said, "The Dating Project, Observations of Emotional Patterns in Digital Intimacy." And under that, there was a list. Case Study 1, The Comedian. Case Study 2, The Ghoster. Case Study 3, The Fixer. Case Study 4, The Skeptic. Case Study 5, The Romantic. Case Study 6, The Mirror. I stared at it for a second, then looked up. "I'm the freaking mirror." She nodded. "You reflect everything. You don't give away much, but you bounce things back in a way that makes people feel like they're being understood. It's rare. You've got good posture for pain." I don't even know what that meant. I just remember feeling my face go warm. She said she was doing a long-form piece, a kind of narrative essay thing about modern dating. Something about emotional honesty and the performance of connection. She told me everyone she'd gone out with in the past month had been part of it. I asked if they all knew. She said they did, eventually. I asked if she'd been recording me. She said, "Only the notes I wrote down after." I said, "So this was research?" She smiled. "Not just that. You're still a person." That didn't help. She packed up her notebook and stood. I was still holding the paper, still trying to decide if I should be mad or impressed. She leaned down before walking off and said, "You gave me more than most. Thank you for being real." And then she left. I sat there for another 20 minutes. Part of me was angry, not because she used me for some project, but because I didn't see it coming. She didn't lie exactly, but she also didn't treat the night like a shared thing. It was a window, and I was a view. I walked home in this weird fog. Didn't listen to music, just kept thinking about that list. The mirror. Like it was a trope. Like it was a role in a structure she'd built before I even showed up. She never followed up. Never messaged again. I found her profile a couple weeks later. Gone. Maybe she deleted it. Or maybe she was already onto case study number 7. I had the paper for a while, then threw it out. And now every time I go on a date, I wonder if I'm being watched or remembered. Not in the romantic way. In the research way. Okay, so I was in a weird place when I matched with Eric. Like not emotionally wrecked or anything, but definitely running low on patience. I just had this stretch of dates where everyone either talked about their ex too much, or tried to psychoanalyze me for liking mint chocolate chip ice cream. I wasn't overthinking it anymore. I was just swiping for whoever didn't instantly annoy me. Eric didn't annoy me. His profile was weirdly professional, like corporate headshot blazer, no dumb Snapchat filters. His bio was short: consulting, traveler, dog person. Let's skip small talk. It gave me this vague, I have an itinerary for my life vibe, but he was cute, and I figured worst case, I'd get a good cocktail out of it. He messaged me something direct: "Let's get a drink this weekend. You pick the spot." I like that. No 16 message buildup. No what you doing energy. Just a plan. So we met at this hotel bar downtown, the kind that's always playing jazz too loudly and makes every drink way too strong. He was already there when I walked in, scrolling through something on his phone. Stood up when he saw me, shook my hand like we were sealing a business deal. It was slightly awkward, but also kind of charming. I couldn't tell yet. He ordered us drinks. I said I'd take whatever he was having, and he lit up like that answer unlocked something in him. Said it was a good test. We sat in this corner booth where the lighting made everyone look 10% more mysterious. The conversation was easy but not deep. He asked me questions like he was trying to tick boxes in his brain. Do you travel often? What's your relationship with your family? Would you say you're adaptable in unfamiliar situations? It felt like a job interview, but with tequila. About halfway through the second drink, he shifted gears and said, "All right, I'm just gonna be real with you." My internal alarm started warming up. He leaned in and said, "I have a strange request. Feel free to say no, but I figured I'd ask." I just blinked at him and said, "Okay." He told me, calmly, like it was no big deal, that his family was having a weekend getaway at this lake house a couple hours out of town. Parents, siblings, countless friends. Apparently it was a big thing they did every year. And this year he'd been on his case about settling down and being the last one single. According to him, his mom had even set up a meeting with a family friend's daughter. So he panicked and told them he had a fiancé. I asked him why he didn't just say he had a girlfriend or even just someone he was seeing. He said, "Because I panicked hard and overshot the lie. Now I need someone to play the part." Then he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'll pay you $600 for the weekend. $200 up front, $400 after. You just have to show up, act like we're together, maybe wear a ring. I'll cover food, drinks, everything." I was stunned, like fully quiet for a full 10 seconds. He added, "You won't have to sleep over. You'll have your own room. It's just a weekend. Saturday morning to Sunday night. Quick in and out." I asked him why he thought I'd say yes. He said, "Because you seem like someone who knows how to play a role when needed." I don't even know what that meant, but it sounded vaguely manipulative and somehow flattering at the same time. He wasn't joking either. He pulled out his phone and showed me a literal note with details, the address, a fake engagement story he drafted, a backup timeline in case someone asked how we met. It was like he'd done this before. The planning was intense. He even had a picture of a ring saved in case we needed props. I didn't know what to say. Like, it wasn't the worst idea I'd ever heard, and it's not like he was asking me to do anything illegal. Just pretend to love him for a few hours and then vanish. But I also didn't want to become a random family's dinner table story for the next decade. I asked him if he'd done this kind of thing before. He said no, but his friend had, and it worked like a charm. I asked if he planned to tell his family the truth eventually, and he just kind of smiled and said, "Maybe. Or maybe they'll just believe I got dumped after." Somehow that was worse. I asked him if any part of this was real, like if he even wanted to date me, or if I was just the first person who said yes to drinks. He said, I wouldn't have asked if I thought you were boring. You seem smart. Confident, you'd make me look good." That didn't feel like an answer. I told him I needed to think about it. He slid a napkin across the table with a hotel room number and said, "I'm staying here tonight. If you say yes, just text me before midnight. I'll send you the Venmo." I left without finishing my drink. The thing is, I actually did think about it. For like an hour. Sat on my couch staring at the ceiling, wondering if $600 was enough to sit through a fake engagement and play how we met with someone's great aunt. Wondered if I could lie convincingly about how he proposed, or if I'd slip up when someone asked how long we'd been dating. In the end, I didn't text him. Didn't take the money. Didn't play the part. But I still kind of think about what would have happened if I did. He never followed up. I guess that was part of the deal. One and done, no questions asked. Maybe he found someone else. Maybe he went alone and said I got sick. Maybe he printed out a photo of me and made up the whole story anyway. But sometimes I think about that version of me. Fake ring on my finger, smiling at strangers, saying things like, "Oh, he just knew." And it was the easiest yes of my life. So this was one of those dates that just sort of happened. No big build-up, no real expectations. I wasn't even really dating at the time. I had deleted the app for like 3 months, re-downloaded it one random night after watching a rom-com that made me feel lonely for no reason, and just started swiping while I was laying on the floor eating trail mix out of the bag. That's where I was mentally. Amanda was one of the first people I matched with after rejoining the chaos. Her profile wasn't flashy or overly curated. 3 decent photos. One with a dog, one at a rooftop bar, and one blurry one that looked like it was taken on a disposable camera at 2 a.m. Her bio just said, "Here for a little fun, nothing weird," which is maybe the most suspicious thing someone can write, but also very on brand for that app. We messaged back and forth a bit. She had this very direct energy, didn't waste time. Her first message was literally, "Wanna get a drink or nah?" I respect the boldness. I said yes. She picked the bar. I showed up not expecting much. She was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner booth, half hidden behind a candle and a glass holder. She waved me over like we were old friends. She had this vibe like she'd done this before. The outfit, the calm posture, the way she greeted me like I wasn't new. I remember thinking, okay, so she knows exactly what this is. We ordered drinks, and she started asking questions fast. Not the typical first date questions either. She didn't care what I did for work or what my last relationship was like. She asked stuff like, how good are you at goodbyes? And do you think people always know when they're being used? I answered because I'm not great at shutting up when I should. She nodded through everything like she was filing it away. At one point, I asked her what she was looking for. She smiled and said clarity, which sure sounded poetic but didn't actually mean anything. We got along. The banter was good. She had a dry sense of humor and this sharpness about her that made it feel like every sentence had a double meaning. She asked if I wanted to get another round somewhere quieter. I said yeah. We ended up at this weird little spot she knew, not even a bar, just this tiny cafe that was still open somehow at 11 p.m. She knew the guy working there. He gave her a free slice of pie and didn't charge us for tea. She just had that kind of presence where people do stuff for her without asking. We sat at the back table. She told me about her dog, her tattoo she regretted, the time she accidentally started a fire in her dorm microwave freshman year, and then she just dropped it. Right in the middle of me telling a story about getting food poisoning on vacation. She said, by the way, I engage. Just like that. No build-up. No hesitation. I froze for a second, then laughed, thinking maybe she was joking. She wasn't. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo, her hand, a ring, her fiancé smiling next to her at a beach somewhere. The caption said something corny like "Forever starts now." I didn't know what to say. I asked her, so what is this? She looked me dead in the face and said, this is my goodbye. I must have looked confused because she leaned in and said, I wanted one last night with someone who wouldn't matter, just someone new. I figured Tinder was the place for that. That sentence hit me like cold water, not angry, just hollow. She said she loved her fiancé and that he was safe and good and the right choice. She said they had a house lined up, a wedding coming in 6 months, and that it all made sense on paper. But she also said she hadn't done anything chaotic in years, and she didn't want to go into marriage without knowing what it felt like to be completely detached. Detached. That was the word she used. She said I was perfect because I seemed like someone who could keep it casual. Said I looked like I'd understand, like I'd get it. I didn't get it. Not really, but I didn't leave either. I asked her why she told me instead of just lying and pretending. She said, because if you said yes after knowing, it would be more real. And if you said no, at least I tried. She didn't touch me, didn't lean across the table, didn't try to convince me. She just sat there eating pie and waiting for my answer like we were discussing a group project. I didn't say yes, but I didn't judge her either. I told her I didn't think I could be that person, not because I was above it or anything, but because I'd rather matter a little than not at all. She nodded like she knew I'd say that. We finished our tea. She walked me to the train. On the platform, she said, thanks for listening. This was better than I thought it would be. Then she hugged me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sexual. It was just closure, I guess, for something that never really opened. She walked away and I never saw her again. No texts, no follow-up, no sudden appearances in my suggested contacts. Just gone, like it never happened. Sometimes I think about her. Wonder if she ever told him, or if she went home that night and burned the whole thing down or just filed it away like a memory from a past life. I still go to that cafe sometimes. The guy who gave her the pie doesn't recognize me. I sit at the same table and drink the same tea and think about how some people say goodbye before anything starts, just to make sure they still can. I wasn't even really in the mood to date when I matched with Ryan. It was during one of those weird in-between stretches where nothing was particularly bad, but nothing was exciting either. I was working a lot, sleeping weird hours, and spending most of my nights half watching old shows I'd already read 3 times. Tinder was less about connection and more about swiping just to feel like I was moving forward somehow. Ryan's profile was unremarkable in that almost comforting way. Decent pictures, decent bio. He had a friendly smile and wore the kind of button-downs that told me he either worked in sales or had a mom who still bought his clothes. His bio just said, can't believe we're still using this app, which made me laugh because, same. He messaged me first. Something quick and kind of dumb about how he bets I'm a cold brew and sarcasm type. I gave him a courtesy chuckle and replied, mostly out of boredom. but the conversation ended up being surprisingly easy. He didn't talk like a script, didn't ask anything weird. He ate a few bad puns, but owned them, which I respected. By the third night of texting, I agreed to meet out for drinks. We picked a spot that was halfway between our neighborhoods. A cozy little bar that looked like it hadn't changed since 2008. Dim lights, vinyl booths, the kind of jukebox that always has one Lana Del Rey song playing whether someone picked it or not. He got there a couple minutes before me and waited when I walked in. He stood up, gave me a quick hug, and said I looked even better in real life, which would have felt smoother if he hadn't tripped slightly over the leg of the table while sitting back down. Still, it was kind of endearing. The first part of the night went fine. He was funny, maybe a little too eager to impress, but not in a cringy way. Just someone clearly trying. We talked about the usual stuff. Bad dates, weird coworker stories, and how both of us had way too many unopened emails. It was nice. Not fireworks, but pleasant, comfortable. But then something shifted around the second drink. He started talking about his ex. At first, it was just a passing mention. I think I asked something like, "So how long have you been single?" And he said, "Just a few months. It's been a weird transition." Normal answer. I nodded. But then he kept going. Said they were together for 2 years. Said the breakup was mutual but not really. Said he still had some of her stuff in his apartment because she hasn't come to get it and he's not gonna beg. I gave him a few polite nods, thinking we'd move on. But we didn't. He started telling stories about her. Like actual stories. Their first trip together. Their inside jokes. How she hated olives but always ordered them on pizza for him. I remember sitting there thinking, this man is still in love with someone who is not me. I tried to redirect the conversation. Asked him what he'd been watching lately, told him about a book I'd just read. But somehow every topic turned into a seg back to her. If I mentioned a movie, he'd say, "Oh, she hated that one." If I talked about travel, he'd say, "We were supposed to go to Portugal before everything fell apart." At one point, I just straight up said, "You talk about her a lot." He smiled, kind of sheepish, and said, "Yeah, sorry. Still decompressing, I guess." I should have ended the night there. I should have paid for my drink, stood up, and dipped. But I stayed, mostly because I was curious how far this was gonna go. And boy, it went far. He went to the bathroom, and while he was gone, his phone buzzed on the table. I didn't touch it or anything, but I glanced out of habit. The preview said, "Don't you dare use someone again to get my attention." I just stared at it for a second. Heart dropped. There it was. When he came back, I didn't say anything right away. I just waited. He sat down, picked up his phone, and when he saw the text, he kind of sighed and didn't even bother hiding it. He looked up at me and said, "Okay, I feel like I should just tell you something." I braced myself. He said, "So, we're not officially broken up. Like, we are, but she's still kind of in the picture. And I was hoping if she saw me out with someone, maybe she'd finally realize she still wants this." I blinked. Then blinked again. He followed up with, "You're great, by the way. I'm not saying you're just a decoy or anything, but I figured this might help move things along." I sat there staring at him, half shocked and half not. He said it so casually, like this was a normal thing. Like people used other people as emotional chess pieces all the time. I asked, "So I'm what? A threat?" A plot twist. He said, "You're someone she'd take seriously." That sentence sat in the air like something sour. I picked up my jacket, finished what was left of my drink, and said, "You should have picked someone who didn't notice." He tried to stop me, said something like, "Wait, can we talk about this?" But I was already halfway to the door. On the way home, I wasn't even mad. I was weirdly amused, like I'd just gotten cast in a role I didn't audition for. I thought about texting in something snarky. Thought about messaging the ex too, just to say, "Don't worry, I figured it out." But I didn't. I just went home and ordered Thai food and watched bad reality TV until I fell asleep on the couch. He never messaged again. I think he knew there was no point. And honestly, I hope whatever game he was playing ended exactly how it deserved to. This one honestly still makes me laugh, even though at the time I was genuinely confused, mildly stressed, and weirdly close to deleting every social app on my phone. It wasn't even a proper date, really. More like, A very short episode of something that should have never been greenlit in the first place. So I met Yasmin on a Thursday night, not through an app this time, which is rare. I was out with a couple of friends at this rooftop bar. Not a fancy one, just one of those places where the drinks are mostly iced and everyone's pretending the wind isn't wrecking their hair. Yasmin was there with a group that kind of merged with ours because someone's friend knew someone. And suddenly we were all standing in a big circle talking over the music. She stood out. She had this big curly hair, laugh, rings on almost every finger. Kept adjusting her jacket like she was posing for invisible cameras. She made eye contact like she knew something you didn't. And I'd noticed she was filming little clips on her phone throughout the night. Mostly her drink, her shoes, someone else dancing. But she'd do it mid-convo, which felt a little strange. At one point, she turned to me and just started talking like we'd already been mid-conversation. I don't even remember what she said exactly. Something about how all drinks should come with edible flowers, and if they don't, it's a red flag. I laughed, we vibed a little, enough to exchange names and talk for maybe 20 minutes straight while the groove kept bouncing around behind us. We had that fast-paced energy where both people are trying to be clever and cool, but also low-key checking if the other one's single without directly asking. She said something about how dating apps were boring and real-life connections felt better. I said something sarcastic like, well, this must be fate then, and she actually blushed a little, so I figured, okay, maybe I'll shoot my shot. I asked for her number. She gave it. Then she asked me to follow her on TikTok. That should have been the warning sign. I don't usually follow people from one conversation, especially not if I haven't even been on a real date with them yet, but she was already pulling up her account and saying, I make really funny stuff, you'll love it. So I followed her because I didn't want to be rude. Her profile had like a surprising number of followers, with more than I expected. All dating-themed content, little skits, day-in-the-life stuff, voiceovers, and a lot of red flag-type videos. The captions were full of things like, he's not the one if he doesn't open your door, and we don't chase, we replace. I kind of laughed it off. Everyone's got their thing, right? We left the bar separately that night. I texted her the next day saying it was cool meeting her. She replied like 4 hours later with a 2 and a heart. No further conversation. So I figured, cool. It was just a moment. We had a good chat. It happens. I didn't think it was a thing. Then, 2 days later, Saturday morning, my phone starts blowing up. It wasn't texts or calls. It was notifications. People tagging me and stuff. DMs from random usernames. And then my friend Tom sends me a message that just says, Bro, is this about you? Attached was a TikTok from Yasmin's account. It starts with her face, close up, pouting, sad music in the background. She's wearing the same jacket she had the night we met. The caption says, when he says all the right things, then ghosts you the next day. Cue dramatic zoom in. Cut to her sipping wine and shaking her head like she's been emotionally betrayed. Then a slideshow of screenshots, none of them from me, but clearly meant to look like texts from the guy. Stuff like you're amazing, and we should totally hang out soon, followed by a fake read 3:12 p.m. with no response. In the comments, people are lighting me up. Men are wild. Typical behavior. Girl, you dodged a bullet. Name and shame. I'm sitting there still in bed like, what? We met once. We didn't go out. I literally texted her once, got a heart emoji, and that was the full extent of our interaction. I was weirded out, but mostly I didn't want to start drama, so I just left it. Didn't comment, didn't DM her. Just muted her account and figured it would blow over. Then someone found my Instagram, because of course they did, and started tagging me under her latest pic. One person even messaged me asking if I really said the stuff in the TikTok, like that this was becoming an actual thing. So I messaged Yasmin. I kept it civil. Said, hey, I saw the video. Just wanted to clarify. We met for 20 minutes, didn't go out, and I didn't ghost you. Not sure what that was about. She replied almost instantly. Yeah, but the energy was there. I read that about 5 times. I replied, you're allowed to feel what you want, but saying someone ghosted you when there was no date, no plans, and barely one conversation seems kinda off. Just saying. She left me on read, read, whatever, point is, no response. A few hours later, the video had even more views. She didn't delete it. In fact, she posted another one. A follow-up. This time it was her talking straight to camera, saying, sometimes people don't even realize they're emotionally costing. Just because you didn't disappear mid-relationship doesn't mean you didn't make someone feel disposable. At that point, I was over it. Unfollowed, blocked, moved on. But still, for like a week after, I kept getting the occasional DM from some girl telling me to do better, or calling me a coward, or saying I was what's wrong with modern dating. And every time I wanted to scream, I talked to her for 20 minutes. It finally died down. I think the internet just moved on to some other drama. But now, anytime someone asks for my socials right after we meet, I say no. Not because I'm hiding, just because I don't want to accidentally star in a TikTok I didn't audition for. So yeah, that's how I became ghoster guy to a couple thousand people online without even going on a single date.